In this Elden Ring video, we're going to be talking about the new Shadow of the Erdtree DLC trailer that just dropped. We're going to be going through the details, including release date, what's been announced for the game moving forward, and just get into some of the nitty-gritty details of things that we learned about Shadow of the Erdtree from that amazing trailer that just launched just a little bit ago. I will be touching briefly on what we learned about the story of the game from this video, but I think we'll do another in-depth video separate to this, since it probably will take a little bit longer to, unpack everything that was shown, and I don't want to rush together some, lore video that really doesn't explain anything very well. So the first thing that we know is that it's going to be in a completely new world where America first set foot. So it's not going to take place in the lands between. It's going to take place in something called the Shadow Realm or Realm of Shadow, which we don't really know much about this place as of yet. We know that Miquella went there, could be Miquella's dream, but we don't know a lot more about it as of yet. But we do know that you will be playing in a separate map to the base game. So I don't think there's going to be like part of a map that becomes unlocked, and if you ride this direction, then you'll go into the DLC. It's more likely you'll be ported there, and then that will take you to the location. It does look like you will probably enter the DLC from Mohg's throne in that part of the game. So if you remember where that boss is, it's likely that that's where the portal will be. You can get there fairly early in the game, and that would probably be a pretty good point in order to port you into the DLC area. And all we really know about the Realm of Shadow is that it was a land purged in an unsung battle set ablaze by Messmer's flame. Messmer is the character that you see on the cover art. This is the character you see of the statue that's in one of the, collector's edition of the DLC, as you will. And a lot of people are speculating that it could be Miquella. I think personally it might be Rykard if we are seeing an earlier period of time before he became the giant snake. You can see that he does have snakes around him and he uses fire magic. So I wouldn't be shocked if that was who he is, but we don't know 100% for sure, except that this character is obviously playing a very large role in the DLC, as he's shown a lot throughout the trailer. We also know that Miquella went into the Realm of Shadow, and when he did, he divested himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, and all things golden. So we don't really know anything about him other than the fact that he's completely changed. He probably wouldn't be a Miquella that we would recognize, so it's possible that the red-haired character could be him because of that, as previously that's probably not what he would look like. We do know that we were guided personally by Miquella to this place, or in some form of his will, to get to this place, and we'll be following in his footsteps and the footsteps of other NPCs that have made it into this area of the game, who have different motives and different agendas, so there will be brand new NPCs in that regard. One thing that's really great that they mentioned on the website about the DLC is that this area of the game specifically is going to have seamless parts of the game between the overworld and dungeons. This was a big sore point for people playing the base game where, you couldn't transition with an NPC cooperator into a dungeon and then back out. You had to resummon because it just wasn't seamless. We do know that the Shadow of the Erdtree part of the game, that DLC, this will be seamless in that area. I don't know if it's going to be backwards compatible with other areas of the game. That remains to be seen. But at least the new area will have this, and that is going to be absolutely outstanding. On the website, it says that there's going to be new weapons, new equipment, weapon skills, and magic. These are all things that make Elden Ring so good. It's one of the reasons I make so many builds for Elden Ring. The fact that there's so much variety, there's so many different ways to play the game. Getting even more of this means there's going to be even more variety. So you guys can expect a ton more builds from me. There's also going to be new enemies, of course, new bosses. We saw this in the gameplay here. New plot lines with other NPCs to discover. So for you lore junkies out there, there's going to be a lot of new lore in this as well. But one thing that really caught my attention on the website was the mention of new powers. And the reason this gets my attention is that it's on a completely separate line than the equipment, weapons, weapon skills, which all share the same paragraph. New powers is set separately, and it could be referring to these things, like your new powers that you gain, these being them, but it could also refer to new powers of some other mechanic that you gain from doing this that you can then use throughout the game. This is something that I definitely wanted in Elden Ring, was some sort of mechanic that would add to the game in a way that you could go play the base game with this new mechanic, and it would make the game feel new and fresh again besides the DLC itself. So I'm really hoping that's what they mean this is. And you can see some really amazing things happening in the trailer combat-wise. And I don't know if it's referring to those as the new powers or if those are just, other ashes of war or weapon skills or spells, etc. The release date for Shadow of the Erdtree was announced to be June 21st, which is exactly or almost exactly 4 months from now, depending on when it releases specifically. But that should give you guys plenty of time to get ready for it. We will obviously be creating some content, getting players ready for the DLC. We're going to learn more about the DLC over the next 4 months for sure. I'm sure that FromSoftware and Bandai Namco have their marketing strategy set up, and I would imagine that over time we'll get to hear and see more. I would imagine there'll be more trailers, etc., of the game. But I think this is a really good window for the game. I know a lot of people were probably hoping that it would drop sooner, given that Elden Ring came out about 2 years ago at this point. But there's not a lot coming out at that point of the year, so I think a lot of players will not have to decide between which games they want to play at that time of year, and they can just focus on Elden Ring, which I think is going to be great. And even if you're not happy about it, at least you have a release date now, and you can start the countdown to that release date. All in all, there's really a lot to unpack from this trailer, and I had to watch it probably a dozen times before it even sank in. There's just so much happening. Trying to connect the dialogue to what you're seeing on the screen, if it makes sense, trying to figure out what they're talking about. Probably be going through this over the next day or so, just trying to really understand and get more information, at least from a story perspective and even gameplay perspective, what's really happening in this trailer. But it was definitely on par with what I expected the trailer to be. Showed new moves, it showed new spells, it showed new gameplay, combat, had a lot of cryptic dialogue that really pulled you in, and it was just jam-packed. So much inside of it. For instance, there was a scene there where he's doing martial art kicks, and that makes me wonder, is this a new power? Is there a technique you can get? Or is this just an Ash of War? There's a scene where he raises up into the air with wings, and it looks like he's about to plunge a sword down. Now that could be an Ash of War, could be a spell, could be a new power. There are things like that that really draw your attention, and obviously the main focal boss being a character that we don't immediately recognize, but somehow seems familiar, is obviously pulling everyone in as well. We also know that the game is going to be $39.99 on Steam. If you go there, that is the price there. I would assume it will be the same for PlayStation and Xbox, but I have not checked on those stores. $39.99 is quite high price for an expansion. Obviously, for Elden Ring expansion, that seems like a steal, but that would lead me to believe that it's going to be a rather large-sized expansion. Obviously, 2 years plus in development would also lead you to believe that, but I think we're going to get a huge amount of content in this, and one of the things that wasn't mentioned and one of the remaining questions is, how much content is there? How many bosses are there? How many new weapons and spells and characters are there in the expansion? Because Elden Ring took over 100 and some hours to finish, and for some people it was even more than that. How much is this one going to take? And that's something I hope I can get answered soon. And one last thing I want to mention that I should have mentioned earlier in the video, but I'm kind of scatterbrained right now just because it's so raw and there's so much stuff to, go through, is that, story related, you do see what looks to be a photo of Fia, the bedside companion, and her husband on the wall in some sort of keep or castle or something like that, which would lead me to believe that the period of time of this game, or sorry, the DLC rather, is going to be earlier than what we've seen from Elden Ring. It should be an earlier period of time. That's obviously not 100% proof, but it is some evidence that this would be taking place in an earlier period of time. And if the main protagonist enemy there is Rykard, the red-haired guy, which I think is Rykard, it would make sense to see him in that earlier period of time before he's become a snake. So that wraps up, kind of the gist of what we learned from the trailer in a nutshell, gameplay mechanic-wise and some story elements. We'll obviously have a separate video going through the story more in depth. I really want to have some time to process that and put something out that's, a little bit more high effort in terms of my theories of what's really going on in this story. But you can expect more Elden Ring content on this channel. We've obviously been ramping up our Elden Ring content over the last few months, anticipating the DLC trailer drop. A lot of people picked up the game in December when it was on sale and have been playing. There's a lot of new interest in the game. I think this trailer is only going to generate even more. So you can expect more content. We'll continue with the build guides. We'll have, finish up the weapon guides, maybe do some Ash of War guides, etc. And obviously get that video on the story setting of the game here very soon. And just continue on until we finally get the release of the DLC on June 21st of this year. So what do you guys think of the trailer? Is it everything that you hoped it would be and more? Are there questions you still have out there? Who's the red-haired character? What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on what we've seen so far and your lore theories? I want to hear them. Let me know in the comments below.
Bye.